All right, come on. Oh, we're using the webcam. I don't like that. Where's the cord for you? That should be it. I don't want to use the webcam. Who set this up and who keeps changing it? Oh gosh. Yeah, nobody needs to see that. All right, let me get this figured out really quick. So I don't like being linked to using the webcam all the time. So let me go ahead and change that video. How is that not hooked up? That makes no sense. They need to quit messing around with it. All right, give me a minute. These things happen. All right, are you even turned on? You should be. Okay, let's see. You go down there, you go down there, you go all the way up here. Let's try that. And back in. Okay. I don't want to use the goofy webcam. All right, let me see. Really? I have to use the stupid webcam? Ugh. People need to quit messing around with things, and if they're gonna mess around with things, this is like the closest you'll see to me getting legitimately angry. People need to quit messing around with things, and if they are gonna do that, they need to put them back the way they were. Okay. All right, how's it going today, everybody? I'll stop ranting about these things, and I will be cool. All right, no, that's none of those things. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to figure that out. I will probably figure that out after class. All right, so a couple of quick announcements for you. So if you go ahead and hop onto my Kadi, which I will do for you. Let's go ahead and pin that video. And yep. All right, so if we go to our page, I have already put up our third homework assignment, which will be due next Thursday, along with your annotated bibliography and your references. So yeah, it's in the syllabus, and I told you about that on Tuesday too. But if you're finding as you're kind of working on things that you're having some difficulty, so here's a couple of reminders for that annotated bibliography and references. You only have to find 3. I have already given you 2, and they're right up here. So Craik-Tulving 1975 and Craik-Lockhart 1972. We are replicating experiment number 9 from Craik-Tulving, which I went over not yesterday, but on Tuesday. And then Craik-Lockhart is the theoretical framework. The basic idea is that the more deeply that you process something, the better you are going to remember it. So your next homework assignment is due on Thursday. And again, if you're having difficulty getting things in, talk to me. If you're needing help, talk to me. I have office hours and nobody comes. Like, those hours are set aside for you. And if you want to come in on a day when I have office hours for another class, nobody's coming to those either, so just come. You can come into my office. I'll make you do a health assessment. But other than that, I'm happy to have you. And if you have questions, I think that's a really good thing. So here's kind of, you may have to go back and reread part of Why We Lie, but we took a group of 450 participants, split them into 2 groups, and set them loose on that matrix task. So you had to find the 2 numbers in a matrix that added up to 10. We asked half of them to recall the 10 commandments and the other half to recall 10 books that they had read in high school. So both of these are recall tasks. So the overall task is the same, but what they're recalling is different. One group gets books, the other gets the 10 commandments, which reminds them of that morality factor. Among the group who recalled 10 books, we saw the typical widespread but moderate cheating. So again, the idea, everybody cheats a little bit. In the group that was asked to recall the 10 Commandments, we observed no cheating whatsoever. So we're going to talk today, once I kind of go over how to write an annotated bibliography, we are going to talk about different types of claims like association claims and frequency claims and a causal claim. A causal claim is about a cause-effect relationship. Make sure that you use a causal verb, which we will also talk about today and on Tuesday. You need to be able to identify variables. You need to figure out what kind of study the researchers did. Is it correlational or is it experimental? And how would you know? And then, yeah, it wouldn't be a Dr. Gilchrist class in research methods if she didn't make you sketch another graph. So what I'd like you to do is sketch a graph of the result that's described and seeing if the results support the causal claim. And we will talk either today or we will talk on Tuesday about the 3 criteria that you need to have to be able to determine a cause-effect relationship. So you just have to answer those questions. It's 10 points. Do your best. If your graph's not quite right, I'm not going to be like, you get a 6 out of 10. Boo. It's going to be more like, if it's a little off, I'm still going to give you a 10 because it's clear that even if it's not perfect, you put enough thought into it that I'm okay giving you a 10. So I am pretty generous with the homeworks. Especially when there's not always a 100% correct answer. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, so another thing, quiz number 2. So your second quiz opens on Friday at 5 o'clock, and it will be due 5 minutes before class on Tuesday. Remember that you get multiple opportunities to take it. If you accidentally close yourself out before the deadline and you want me to reopen it for you, just shoot me an email. I can reopen it for you. You can take it as many times as you want. I will take your highest score, and there is an extra credit opportunity within that quiz, so you can earn an extra credit point. All right, does anybody have any questions on anything? Okay, so I will have your, did everybody get a good opportunity to kind of explore databases, either Psych articles or Google Scholar? Are you feeling pretty comfortable with that? Does anybody have any questions or need some help? Just as a, oh yeah, Julia.
Could you actually send the link from last time? Because I do need to do that.
You want the video, the link to the video? Yeah, I can share that with everybody. I didn't share it with everybody last time, but I can share it with the whole class if you'd like a refresher. And just as a friendly reminder, if you are not on campus, so if you are a commuter student and you're trying to do this from your apartment or wherever you may be, or if you are online only, Psych articles is not really going to be the best option for you, just because searching Psych articles only works if you can get to the Coddy library page. So if you are off campus, use Google Scholar or ask me for sources that you would like. I'm always happy to help. Remember too that for this annotated bibliography, the 5 papers that you need, those 3 that you have to find yourself, you do not have to stick to those later if you find a better one. So really for this, just find me 3. So before we move on to talking about chapter 3, I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about writing an annotated bibliography, which I have put up for you. So you can look at this anytime you want. So one of the things you're going to notice is that I require, that is due on Thursday, is a references section and an annotated bibliography. Now these are not necessary, I think each of them is 15 points, so it's 30 points total. So it doesn't have to be perfect yet for me to give you a good grade, or for you to earn a good grade, rather. But this is an opportunity for you to practice looking for articles, trying to read articles, and summarize what you have read. So I'm going to start by talking about what an annotated bibliography is. And then I would also like to show you an example of a references section. So you are in a really good position to be able to do these things. And again, I've got office hours. Now I do have a lot of meetings on Thursday. So if you're trying to find me at the last minute, you're going to interrupt a Zoom meeting. So if you need to meet with me, and actually I'm going to start maybe this week instituting something that I haven't done in a couple of weeks. So how would you feel about me? Well, maybe not this week because I know it's Super Bowl Sunday, but if you're not really the Super Bowl type, if you want to email me on Sunday, I can Zoom with you on Sunday night if you need some help. Okay, but what I'm probably going to do starting after Super Bowl Sunday is making a designated Sunday study session for this class for the entire year. We're not going to meet in the summer, don't worry. But during the spring semester and the fall semester, I want us to get into the habit of, if you have questions or if you need help working through homework, that's going to be especially important once we start getting into statistics next semester. I just really like the idea of you having a designated time where you can come and talk to me, kind of like the review sessions that we do for exams, but more for going over homework, writing questions, things like that. And you aren't required to be there. So there are plenty of times where I've shown up and I wait 15 minutes for people to come in and nobody does, and I log off, I call it a night. It's fine. But I might go ahead and do that this week. So if you get an invitation to a Zoom meeting, don't feel obligated to come. But if you have questions, I will be on there for about 15 minutes. If you can catch me before 7:15, I'm happy to answer any questions. Or if you need to meet with me at a different time, email me. I'm happy to help you out. But I would say for this, start getting in the habit of reaching out to me. I am never going to make you feel bad if there's something you don't understand. Writing is a skill. You're not going to get good at it overnight. So I promised I would tell you a story about one of the journal articles that I held up the other day. Once we talk about how to write an annotated bibliography and a references section, I will share it with you. Okay, so what is an annotated bibliography? So a bibliography, or in APA writing, we refer to it as a references section. This is a list of sources that you used to help research your topic. So here's what's really critical, and I brought this up last time. If it is cited in your paper, it needs to be in your references. If you are not citing it, don't put it in the references. If you cite it and it's not in your references, you're plagiarizing, and we don't want that either. So I know that in English writings, they sometimes have a works consulted. You can kind of think of this as works cited. Only include in your references what you cite. And in this case, for this paper, by the end of next December, I want you citing at least 5. So you need to cite at least 5 minimum. So a references is a list of sources. An annotated bibliography includes either a summary of those sources or you evaluating those sources. So you're going to include a paragraph or 2 about the major findings of the article and think about why you picked it for this paper. Like, why did you think this would be useful? I'm telling you, polar seltzer, orange vanilla. Now just how to get it under the scarf mask. It looks like I'm eating my straw. There we go. All right. Oh no. Oh, you're too excited. Okay, does anybody need me to stay here for a second? Emily, do you need more time? Okay. Maya, do you need more time? Okay, and this is on e-learning, so you can go back and look at this anytime you want. So here's kind of an example. I'm a big fan of the Purdue Online Writing Lab. Yes, It's not evil. It's a secure site. It's fine. To kind of, in the interest of being cute, I will also tell you, I was using this for my papers when I was in undergrad. So we have this online writing lab. Here's a variety of different things that you can actually look at. There are too many pop-up windows. So we have specific guides. We want the APA. So we want very, very specific types of writing. So we have our APA guide. So this is based on the 7th edition, the most recent edition, and you should be working from the 7th edition. So let's go ahead and go into a formatting and style guide. So I'm first going to show you a references section, and then I'm going to show you an annotated bibliography. So a references section, let's take a sample paper. I love the sample paper. Okay, let's find it. So, can't I just, here we go. Okay, so a sample paper, the sample paper you pull up kind of looks like this. We're gonna go ahead and scroll to the end. So at the very end of your paper, you don't have to worry about this now, you just need to do a references section. Here's how it is going to work. So I can give you the basics. We're going to go into greater detail about how to do this later. So if there are mistakes in your references section, that's okay. I am going to give you feedback. I will not be harsh on mistakes this first time around, but I am going to give you feedback on them. I expect you to take that feedback and make corrections in the future. And if I don't see those changes, well, that's when Dr. Gilchrist gets a little harsh. See? Karate chop for emphasis, chop chop. So we kind of organize these by the first author's last name. So for example, I'm going to turn off stop share for a second because I kind of want to show this to you on the board, and I'll make this big. Speaker view, there we go. Okay, so we have two papers that start with Craik, right? So that makes it tricky. So because Craik is the first author for both of those papers, what we have to do is then look at the second author and do that in alphabetical order. So when you write your references, these are the dead markers. We got to get my own markers. They're always in my bag so they don't dry out and die. We're going pink today. I like that. It coordinates. All right. So for your references section, so it's going to look like that. And then because you have an and, we're going to do that funky little ampersand. And then in this case, Lockhart is going to come next. And then you're going to cite the year, the title of the article, and things like that. The second Craik article will be Craik and Tulving. And that will come next. So if your first author's last name is the same, or you have multiple papers with the same first author, you're then going to organize it by the alphabetical order of the second author. What happens if your second authors match? Then you go to the third. We'll talk some more about APA formatting very, very soon. So once we're done with chapter 3, we will spend a ridiculous amount of time on APA formatting, more than you can stand. But here's kind of a hint. You organize these in the form of alphabetical order by the first author's last name. And by the way, respect the author order that is in that paper. That author order is set that way for a reason. Author order is based on who provides the greatest intellectual contribution. Don't change it. If I'm first author on a paper, I want to be first author because I have an ego. And a lot of other people do too. So respect the order. It was set that way for a reason. All right. Really quick. Uh-oh. There. Get back here. Eh. Why isn't it doing what I want it to do? Did it free? Oh, it took you long enough. This computer's got too much stuff on it. So you can kind of see here that it's organized in alphabetical order by author. Notice that everything is double spaced. And notice that we are using what is called a hanging indentation. So the first line of a reference hangs over the rest. So the format kind of works like this. We have our author names. We have our year. We have the title of the paper. We have the journal, the issue, and the page numbers. And this is something I'm in a really bad habit of not doing. You also want to include the HTTP, like the web address for that paper, if you have it. If you don't, that's okay. In the case of something like Craik and Tulving and Craik and Lockhart, those were made in the 1970s before online digital articles existed, so you don't have to worry about those. So this is kind of the format. Really make use of that sample paper. And so here's what I can promise you. Tonight, I will email all of you recordings of today, recordings of last class so that you can get more practice with that database search, and the link to the Purdue Online Writing Lab so that you can look at this references section. I would also look at the references sections in some other papers so you just get an idea. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect for me to give you full points, at least this time. But I am going to give you feedback, and so the next time you get that feedback, or the next time we do something like this, I want to see that you've integrated that feedback. So the references, you'll notice that there's really nothing there about what you got out of the paper. There's no summary of the paper or anything like that. I can't spell. Graphy, O-W-L, Purdue. I can't spell Purdue either. So an annotated bibliography kind of looks like this. So let me see if we have a sample. Okay. And there is a handout for the general format. One of the things that's actually useful here, you can actually cite your source automatically and cite that. Where is... This is not going to have the annotated bibliography on it. Sample annotated bibliography, please. Where is it? Here we go, a sample. So they have some samples. So basically what you're going to do with an annotated bibliography, it's going to look just like a references section, except after each entry, you're going to add a paragraph about what this article was about and why you included it, why you are including it. So this is to kind of give you an opportunity to read the paper and see if you've got a pretty good understanding of it. Again, I'm going to be pretty gentle with these, but I am going to give you some feedback if it looks like you didn't really read the paper. Yes, Maya. Huh? Not for this. Keep it to a paragraph, though. Okay, so this is MLA. We're going to go ahead and skip this. So here's a sample for APA. So this is a book. So it's going to look a little bit different than how you would cite a journal article. So with a book, we have the author, the year, the book title, and the publisher. Now in your case, what it's going to be is the authors, the year, the journal title, or the article title, the journal title, the issue, and the page numbers. And if you'd like, what I can do is maybe make a very short video tomorrow, kind of going through how to do references, if that helps. So I'll kind of go through an APA handout on that for you, and I'll put that up. So here you can kind of see what they've done. In this book of nonfiction based on the journalist's experiential research, Aaron Reich attempts to ascertain, you don't have to write this formally, please don't use contractions and please don't use slang. As long as you don't use those, we'll be square. Ascertain whether it's currently possible for an individual to live on a minimum wage in America. Taking jobs as a waitress, a maid in a cleaning service, and a Walmart sales employee, the author summarizes and reflects on her work, her relationships with her fellow workers, and her financial struggles in each situation. An experienced journalist, Erin Reich is aware of the limitations of her experiment and the ethical implications of her experiential research tactics and reflects on these in the task. The author is forthcoming about her methods and supplements her experiences with scholarly research on her places of employment, the economy, and the rising cost of living in America. Erin Reich's project is timely, descriptive, and well-researched. So you don't have to go into 2 paragraphs there, but you can say something like, this article looked at levels of processing. Here's why I think it would fit with our replication project. Do you think you might be able to do that? Now, I realize that a week is a pretty fast turnaround time, so do the best you can. I am going to keep that in mind. If you need more help, feel free to email me. I'm a little busier on, like I said, I'm a little busier on Thursday. So if you're doing anything at the last minute, I'm not really going to be able to help out as much. But if you need me earlier in the week or you want to email me, I am more than happy to go over this with you. APA formatting is nitpicky and arbitrary and frustrating. The only way you're going to get good at it is if you practice. And this is really more of an opportunity to get you to read papers, look for papers, and practice writing them out for references. So I'm not going to be super duper hard on you here, okay? I promise. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay. And if you're having difficulty, if you need some help, feel free to email me. So why do we do this? By summarizing the major findings of articles and reflecting on what they add to your background knowledge, you can plan to approach your literature review. That introduction section, that is the first thing you're going to write. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about a pet peeve that I have. And I also understand that you're probably going to do this for a little while. So don't feel like you're making me mad. I understand that this is something that happens when you first start writing. So ideally, you should be trying to integrate your sources in when you're writing. You should have multiple sources that you talk about within the same paragraph. And if you look at introduction sections in certain papers, you will see that most writers have multiple sources that they refer to even within a single sentence. So how many of you are familiar with the 5-paragraph essay? So my first goal is to try to get you out of that. So if you'll remember the 5-paragraph essay, it was kind of like, here's the introductory paragraph, here's source number 1, source number 2, source number 3, here's the closing paragraph. That is a 5-paragraph essay. And at least initially, and I know it's because, maybe you aren't confident in your skills, maybe you haven't had a lot of practice. Here's what I see a lot of, and here's the thing. I would not fail a paper for this. Like, you have to work to fail this class. Trust me, if you take feedback, if you're constantly working to improve your writing, you're going to pass. But this is like rookie level writing here. So introductory paragraph, and then this first paper said this, then a new paragraph. The second paper said this, new paragraph. The third paper said this, and that's fine, but it's kind of boring. Now, I understand too that the only way you're going to get out of that is if you practice. In general, we don't do one source, one paragraph writing. Now, sometimes your papers are so wildly different from each other that you don't really have any choice. My goal is to try to see if I can break this habit. Now, I haven't always succeeded, but I always like to try. So generally, what you want to do is you want to integrate sources on the basis of themes or concepts. So maybe you find 3 papers that provide support for levels of processing. Lump them into one paragraph. On the other hand, maybe you find 2 that don't find evidence for levels of processing. Put them in their own paragraph. Now, you'll only end up with 2 paragraphs, but have I said anything about page limits or word limits here? No, because at least initially, I think those will hamper you. I think those will hamper you. If you feel like you have to write 3 pages, you're going to fall into that one source, one paragraph writing just to fill out 3 pages. I'm far more interested in you getting the skills to synthesize sources. So that is what I have for that. I will give you a short, I am going to do this tomorrow. I'll bring my laptop in and I will film a short video of going over how to write a references section. And I may include a few different examples. And I would say too, do some of your own digging as well. Take a look at the references sections in the Crake papers and kind of see how they're constructed. Now, one thing I will mention, published articles don't really do the double spacing thing. When you're in Word or a PDF or anything like that, I do want you double spacing. I can show you a few examples of manuscripts that I've written with references so you can look at those too, because I have them on hand and they're very easy because they're on my work computer. All right, any questions? Okay, so now we're gonna kind of shift gears. Thanks for hanging in there. I know that talking about writing is just riveting. I get it. I like reading more than writing, for sure. I get it. But you still got to do it. So we are going to talk about, so we talked about how to evaluate things like books and stuff like that. Now we are moving on to claims and validity. So we're going to talk about different types of claims and different types of validity. Oh, get back there. I don't know why I did that. I'm still angry about the camera. I think that's what it is. All right, so we are now kind of moving on to chapter 3. Next week, we're going to take a little bit of a U-turn. We will talk about ethics in 2 weeks, but I want to spend next week talking about APA formatting. Did you have a question, Julia?
Yeah, what was your story?
Oh, yeah, thanks for the reminder. So let me tell you a story. So here's the thing. Writing is a skill, and the more you do it, the better that you get. And I can share a story from this. So I mentioned last time that you can get different types of decisions when you submit a journal manuscript for publication. So I mentioned that you can get an accept, which is really rare. You can get a reject, which is actually pretty common. And somewhere in the middle, you get what is sometimes referred to as revise and resubmit or major revision. Usually you're going to have to collect new data for that. And so usually they give you like maybe 6 months to a year to resubmit that journal article after you've gotten data. But usually what you will have is something called a minor revision decision. And I have gotten a couple of rejections, things basically being like, this isn't really a good fit. But generally, I've kind of lucked out and managed to get minor revision decisions, but this one's my favorite. So this was an article that I submitted to the Journal of Experimental Child Psychology. And they said, yeah, everything looks good. Your introduction is way too long. Folks, we removed about 10 pages from that intro, and we still had a working introduction after that. I am very long-winded, and when I said that my big problem is that I always want to look for more papers, that is what I meant. I had way too many papers, and I have been told I should write a review article sometime because I am just that thorough. So that's my story. I wrote so much that I could take out 10 pages from my intro and still have a good intro. I'm just too wordy. Okay. Well, I thought it was funny. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about variables, and then we're going to talk about 3 different types of claims that you will hear researchers make. So we're either going to hear something called a frequency claim. You may potentially hear something called an association claim, or you will hear about something called a causal claim, which is about a cause-effect relationship. And then we are going to talk about 4 different types of validity. We'll talk about what validity is and why it's important in research methods. And we'll talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. So we have what is called construct validity, external validity, statistical validity, or sometimes statistical conclusion validity, and then internal validity. Now, here's the big catch, and I'm kind of spoiling this ahead of time. You can't meet all of these. You are not going to be able to meet all of these. If you prioritize one, that means you're missing out on another. So if you prize internal validity, you might actually be losing external validity. So it's going to require a little bit of work on your part to figure out what type of validity is most important to you. So now let's talk a little bit about variables. So just as a reminder, a variable is something that can change. So what's really critical for a variable is that it needs at least 2 levels or 2 values. So sometimes we call those values, we call them levels. So here's an example. What is the variable that is present in this statement? So identify the variable. 80% of college students have sexted. Oh my. So what is the variable here? Whether or not you have sexted. So there are students who sext and students who do not. And so that would be the variable. And there are 2 levels. Either you have sexted or you haven't. So there's 2 levels. These examples come from your book, by the way, not from prudish Dr. Gilchrist. Okay, so can somebody name the variable in this statement? People who attend church regularly lie more often than others. By the way, y'all, these are fake statements. These aren't necessarily based on research. So what would be a variable here? Whether or not you lie. Well, everybody lies. It's more about how much you lie. And is there any other variable that we can see here? How often you attend church. And we could divide that variable up in different ways. We could make 2 levels, such as, do you attend church regularly or not? So 2 levels. We could do more than that. We could say, do you attend church regularly? Do you attend church some of the time? Do you not attend church at all? And in this case, we've got 3 levels. So there are a lot of different ways that we can divide up these variables, but what's important to note is that they vary. Now, on the other hand, let's say I have a statement like this. 72% of Americans smiled yesterday. Okay, so if I'm looking at the nationality of this research study, is there a variable? No, we're looking at Americans. So in this particular case, nationality is functioning as a constant. It does not vary. So constants do not vary. So for example, if I have people that identify as, if I say 87% of people who identify as female felt bad about what they ate yesterday. In that case, if I'm looking at gender or reported identification of gender in that instance, that's a constant because I'm only looking at one gender identification. Okay. Any questions so far? So remember, variables, they vary. That's why they call them variables. They change. Okay. So one of the things that we can find is that a variable can be something that we measure, or it can be something that we actually manipulate. And I do not mean manipulation as in, oh, I'm emotionally manipulating somebody. I mean manipulating as I can assign who gets what variable. Now, there are some variables, and I kind of hinted at this a couple of weeks ago. There are some types of variables that it is unethical or impossible to manipulate. For example, can I manipulate age? If I want to look at a research study, that looks at age, can I manipulate the age of somebody? I cannot. I do not have a magical aging gun and I'm like, zap, Emma's a child. Zap, Maya is an old lady. You know, I can't do that. And then I can de-age them when I'm done. It doesn't work that way. I can't actually manipulate age. What I can do is get different groups of people in different age groups and look at them that way. In this case, I am measuring their age. I am not manipulating it. Now, likewise, there are some other variables that I can only measure. I cannot manipulate your socioeconomic status. I cannot manipulate a lot of your own personality characteristics. I cannot manipulate things like race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity. I can't manipulate those things. But what I can do is I can measure them. Now, on the other hand, there are some variables that we can actually manipulate. So let's say that I put you in a driving simulator. I can manipulate who texts while they're driving in that simulator and who doesn't. Notice that I said simulator and not putting them behind the wheel of a car. We do not want to do that. That would be very unethical. Here, text and drive and we'll see what happens. No, we're going to do that in a simulator where the conditions can be as similar as possible. We don't want to get anybody into trouble. Likewise, if we're doing an alcohol study, and some colleges and universities do look at effects of alcohol on behavior and the brain and things like that, we're obviously going to assign one group alcohol and another group a placebo. Additionally, we're not going to let them leave the lab until they are sober. They actually have to take a breathalyzer and they can't leave until they've sobered up. Because if something bad happens to them when they leave, the lab gets in trouble. So oftentimes we will find that people suffer because food much more. Yeah. So first of all, these students sign up for the study. They have to be over 21. They are not allowed to leave the lab until they have a breathalyzer, and even then, these labs will only get people to the legal definition of intoxication, which for most people is just 1 or 2 drinks. So in those cases, they have to give consent. They're allowed to withdraw at any point. If they've alcohol, they have to sober up first, and we do not let them leave until they are sober, and they come in knowing those risks. We only do it with people of drinking age. We don't do it underage. That's bad. Okay, so I kind of mentioned that some variables can only be measured. I cannot manipulate your age. That is impossible. Other variables can be manipulated or measured. So for example, let's take one variable. So maybe I want to look at aggression. What is a way that I could measure somebody's aggression? Okay, but so you're going to make them mad, but if I wanted to see how aggressive they were after I made them mad, how would I measure it? Right. So they could hit something, we could record the strength. We could give them a survey or a personality inventory that measures how much anger they have. They could report it on a survey. All of these things are ways that we can measure. Stella, going back to your point, we can manipulate people into being angry. We can make them mad. So as we kind of saw in the previous chapter, we can have fake feedback from a student named Steve who says, this is the worst paper I ever read. That'll make some people angry. So some people get that feedback and other people don't. So we can manipulate anger. We can also measure it. And it turns out that a lot of different variables out there can be both manipulated and measured. Okay, so we have a distinction between measured and manipulated variables. We also have a distinction between a conceptual variable and an operational definition. We kind of talked about operational definitions when we watched our little Gremlins video, and I still say my favorite part was with that puppet. I guess here's my question when I think of that clip. Why did the gremlin have a butterfly puppet and a lobster puppet? It made no sense to me, but I love it because it doesn't make sense. But when we talk about, I asked you to look for instances of aggression. That is a case of a conceptual variable. So we actually, in psychology, have a lot of conceptual variables. They are very, very vague theoretical constructs. It's why if you've ever had cognitive psychology with me, I often crack a joke about the fact that I teach about a lot of things that don't actually exist. And that's because a lot of what we talk about in cognitive psych are theoretical conceptual variables such as these. So let's take an example like anxiety. Anxiety can be a very difficult thing to measure if you don't define it well. So are we talking about meeting the criteria for an anxiety disorder? Are we merely talking about stress? Are we talking about self-reported emotions? Are we talking about physiological reactions? There are a lot of different ways that we could take this. We have similar things with things like intelligence. How are we going to define whether a behavior is intelligent? Or creativity. How do we define creativity? So all of these are conceptual variables. Operational definitions occur when I say, for the purposes of this study, I'm going to define anxiety as having a heart rate over 115 beats per minute. Or I'm going to define anxiety as a rating of greater than 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 on a survey question. So I'm very, very clear about how I'm choosing to define it. Now, does this cover all possible instances of anxiety? No, of course not. But by kind of shrinking our focus and focusing on a very clear, specific definition of how we are choosing to define this, we make it very clear to others how we are measuring this, and they can understand what we're trying to do, and they can try to replicate that as well. They also turn very conceptual, abstract things into things that we can manipulate or measure. We could very easily manipulate somebody's anxiety by making them watch a scary movie until their heart rate goes up. We could also measure that same amount of anxiety. So there's a distinction between a conceptual variable and one that we have chosen through an operational definition. We have to be very, very clear about how we're choosing to define our terms. So you don't need to write this down. This is in your textbook. So we can think about a few different examples of conceptual variables. So for example, car ownership. Now I know that that doesn't seem very conceptual. I don't think it's very conceptual, but we're going to base, the book says it is, so we're going to go with it. So an operational definition, and remember that this is just one possibility. Researchers ask people to circle, I own a car or I don't on their questionnaire. So we basically have two levels. You either own a car or you don't. You can't manipulate car ownership. I can't just be like Oprah Winfrey and go, you get a car, you get a car, everybody gets a car. That's not going to work here. So in this case, this is a measured variable. If we're talking about expressing gratitude to a romantic partner, in this case, we could have researchers ask people to self-report the extent to which they agree with items such as, I tell my partner often that she or he is the best, and this is based on a rating scale, so it could be as low as 1, strongly disagree, to 7, strongly agree. Again, this is something we are not manipulating, this is something we are measuring. The type of story told about a scientist. Researchers assigned participants to read stories about Einstein and Curie, which related either to their struggles or to their achievements. So again, we have 2 levels. You're either hearing about struggle or you're either hearing about achievement. In this case, we have manipulated that. We have said, okay, some people are going to listen to this type of story, other people are going to listen to this type of story. We have what time children eat dinner. Using a food diary, researchers had children write down what they ate. So they basically divided children into 2 groups, those who ate between 2 and 8 and those who ate after 8. And that again is measuring. Now, here's what's really important. There are a lot of different ways that we can choose to operationalize a variable. There is no one right answer here. Now, some things will be easier to conceptualize than operationalize than others, but there are a lot of different options. So for example, let's say that we were talking about school achievement. We could have people self-report. I generally don't like self-report. Why don't I like self-report? Because A, people aren't always very insightful into their own processes, and 2, people lie. I would rather have something a little bit more objective. And if you're like me and you want something more objective, you could check school records. Or you could have school teachers report observations of students to basically see if certain children are achieving more than others. So there are more than one way to operationalize something. So whatever way you pick is not necessarily bad. It's more about what's important to you. So now let's talk about some different types of research claims. And it's Thursday, it's close to the end of the week. Y'all are looking kind of glum, so at some point I'm going to take you to one of my favorite websites. We're going to look at spurious correlations at some point today. That will make you smile, I hope. And if it doesn't, well, at least it'll make me smile. Okay, so when we are talking about findings from research, now let's be clear, not all of these are based on research. Some of these could be based on personal experiences. We are going to talk about 3 different types of claims. So we have frequency claims, association claims, or causal claims. Now, depending on the type of claim that you are getting, that can actually tell you how many variables you are dealing with here. So for example, usually, and we're going to go into more detail about each of these types of claims so that you know which is which. A frequency claim is basically how often do people do something, or how many people do this thing. So for example, 4 in 10 teens admit to texting while driving. That's shocking. That's actually kind of low. I'd expect it to be higher. Raise your hand if you text while driving. It's okay. I'm not judging, because occasionally I got kind of spoiled. My car clicks into my phone, so I can basically call anybody without having to look at my phone. I just use my car dashboard. I don't know if that's better or worse, but a few people raise their hands. I don't judge. I've watched my mother type out on a BlackBerry like 10 years ago, and I was just like, Mom, what are you doing? Stop it. So 4 in 10 teens. So in this case, a frequency claim is based on one variable. How many people are texting? Are you texting or are you not? It's one variable. You're either texting or you're not. There's two levels here. 42% of Europeans never exercise. That's a variable. How much are they exercising? Middle school kids see 2 to 4 alcohol ads a day. So that's about the frequency of the alcohol ads in that case. How often are you seeing these ads? So the frequency claims are always about one variable. And you'll notice that it's how often you see something, how many people do this thing, how often do people do this thing. Now, an association claim is usually going to be based off of a correlational study, but not always. So an association claim is about two variables that are related to each other or associated with each other. So for example, single people eat fewer vegetables. Well, that's a lie. I eat all my vegetables. No, we can't necessarily say that though. Remember that just because that's true for me doesn't mean it's true for most people. So in this case, we have two variables. Are you single or are you not? And how many vegetables do you eat? So we have two variables and they're related to each other. Angry Twitter communities linked to heart deaths. So here we have maybe the variable is how angry your Twitter group is, or maybe it's whether you're on Twitter at all. And then cardiovascular health or frequency of cardiovascular death. Girls more likely to be compulsive texters. So in this case, we have gender, and then we have how often you text as the variable. Suffering a concussion could triple the risk of suicide. So here we have the instances, whether you have a traumatic brain injury, and then likelihood of suicide in this particular case. So in all of these cases, notice that we've said that there's some kind of a relationship there. Now pay attention to the words you hear. Linked, more likely, triple the risk. None of these necessarily are cause and effect claims. When you hear something like linked or more likely, I want you to think about a correlational claim. And as we are going to learn, and you will see it on many, many internet communities, correlation does not equal causation. Then we have our causal claims. We have two variables in which one causes the other. So music lessons enhance IQ. So when we hear enhance, we mean make higher. So we have one variable having music lessons, and that increases IQ. Babysitting may prime brain for parenting. Family meals curb. So curb in this case means stop. So in that particular case, that again implies a causal link. Family meals curb eating disorders. Why sleep deprivation makes you crabby. So making implies a causal claim. Now again, a lot of research studies will make these three types of claims, but not all of these claims are based on actual research. They could be polls or things like that, or based on anecdotal experience. Okay, so let's start by talking a little bit more about those frequency claims. So what is a frequency claim? A frequency claim basically describes a rate or a degree of a single variable. So we're looking at one variable, and it's something that we measure. We do not manipulate. So we're not manipulating here, we're only measuring. So we can't make any sort of cause and effect relationship here. We couldn't even if we wanted to, because there's only one variable here. What's causing it? We don't know. So one example that I already kind of showed you is 4 in 10 teens admit to texting while driving. Another example would be 2 out of 5 Americans say they worry every day. So in these particular cases, we are only looking at one variable. How often are you texting while driving? And how often are you worrying? That is what we are measuring here. The scarf mask is pretty, but sometimes it's a little more trouble than it's worth. Okay. I will get up and stretch. If you would like to stretch too, you are more than welcome to do so. I know it's been a long week. You only got 15 minutes left. You can do it. Urgh. All right. Ooh, that feels good. My mask ear loops have a little bead and it's hitting right behind my ear. It does not feel good, so I'm just going to give my temple just a little bit of a massage. That feels nice. All right, is everybody good? Does anybody need some more time here? Okay, cool. Oop, going backwards. Now let's talk about an association claim. So an association claim is always going to argue that one level of a variable is likely to be associated with a particular level of another variable. So going back to that example, single people eat fewer vegetables. So in this case, we're talking about one level of a variable. We're talking about marital status. And generally, how we tend to group marital status is kind of based on how we do it on tax documents. So you're either single, married, divorced, or widowed. So there are 4 different levels there, but we're focusing on one level. Being single is associated with eating fewer vegetables, and that is also its own level. So basically, we've got one level marital status that is associated with a level of vegetable eating. So here's what's really critical. Can I manipulate your marital status? Heck no. Can I manipulate how many vegetables you eat? I mean, I can, but if I'm looking at the relationship between marital status and diet, I can't manipulate marital status. And if I want to look at that relationship, I can't necessarily manipulate diet in this case. So I'm going to have to measure that as well. So here's the thing. You cannot say that being single makes you eat fewer vegetables. There might be a causal relationship there, but there may not be. And what's really critical is that both of these are measured. If they are both measured, we say that they correlate with each other if they are associated with each other. So how, oh, sorry, I get too excited. I'm like, wait, is everybody good though? Okay, so how can we identify association claims? Well, here's why. So people with higher incomes spend less time socializing. I can't manipulate your socioeconomic status, so that's probably measured. I also, if we're talking about spending less time socializing, it's kind of clear that I didn't manipulate that. I measured it. Romantic partners who express gratitude, again, I can't manipulate that. I can only really measure it in this instance. And they're 3 times more likely to stay together. This little trackpad is so sensitive. My goodness. They're 3 times more likely to stay together. Can I manipulate somebody into staying together as a researcher? Can I do that? I'm like, no, you have to stay together for the research. No, you're not going to be able to do that. Both of those are measured. People who multitask the most are worst at it. Now, people reporting that they multitask a lot, now I can manipulate whether or not you multitask, but when we're saying people who multitask the most, that implies people are self-reporting. That implies that I measured rather than manipulated. And if they're the worst at it, that means that I measured that too. So there are 3 different types of associations that we can have, or 3 types of correlations. We can have a positive association, We can have a negative association, or we can have a big fat nothing association or a zero association. Okay, so here is an example of a positive association. So we're looking at data from the amount of expressed gratitude in couples and relationship longevity. So notice that there's a lot of scatter here. And that's to be expected. Everybody's going to be really different. But when you plot, notice that in general, it tends to follow the pattern of the more gratitude that you express, the longer your relationship tends to last. Now, we do have some outliers here, and I don't like those. Like, this is probably dragging all of this like up. But in general, the more gratitude you express, the longer your relationship tends to last. So a positive association is basically as one variable increases, the other variable also increases. We can also have a negative association. So going back to the report of multitasking, we rate the frequency of multitasking, so people self-report that, and then we have them actually do it. And again, it's not a perfect relationship, but do notice that as people report a greater frequency of multitasking, look at the y-axis, it goes down. So this is what we would call a negative association. As one variable increases, in this case, the frequency of multitasking, the skill at multitasking actually drops. Dr. Gilchrist could have told you that. Also, I don't actually believe people can multitask truly. I got data to back it up. And not correlational data either. And then finally, we have zero association. So for example, time of dinner, either early or late, and then childhood weight. So notice that we're mapping this as less obese and more obese. Notice that there seems to be no relationship at all. It basically looks like a shotgun blast with like a horizontal line fits through it best. There's a lot of scatter here. There's no discernible pattern. If you can draw a horizontal line through it and it's the line of best fit, there is zero relationship here. Okay, it's 3:38, so we have a little bit of time. So one of the things that I want to mention, I know especially in intro psych, I know that first chapter on research methods that we talk about, we briefly touch on correlation. And I'm always like, why would you want to do correlational studies when you could do an experiment and find out about cause-effect relationships? And I know that's how I talk. And that's partially because for a lot of what I do, doing an experiment is very, very easy. But I want to be very clear. This is not me ragging on correlations. Correlations, even though they do not help us make cause-effect relationships, can help us make predictions. Next semester, if we have time, we're going to talk about a well-known method called regression. Regression is based on correlational findings, and it allows us to make predictions. So if I know that there is a correlation between how you do on your SATs or your ACTs, your college entrance exams, and how well you do in college, I can make a prediction. I can plug in your SAT score and figure out how well you're going to do in college. Or I can plug in your college grades and get a pretty good idea of what your SAT scores might have been. So correlations are useful because they allow us to make predictions if they're associated with each other. And both positive and negative associations can actually help us make predictions. Obviously, if there's zero correlation, you're not going to be able to make a prediction. Now, we will talk about why correlations are not causal and the criteria that you need for a causal claim next time. So you are more than welcome to read ahead in your book. if you would like to start working on your homework, but we will touch on it by Tuesday, so you'll be good to go. But I thought I would finish the last 5 minutes of class with something that would make you smile. So my students know really interesting things that you would never expect are kind of correlated with each other. And so to kind of wish you a wonderful weekend before I go, I'm going to show you a website that will change the way that you think about correlations forever. I know, a lot of pressure. We are going to go to spurious correlations because I promised. So spurious correlations. So these are basically things that are correlated that you would never expect. Some of these get a little dark. So for example, US spending on science, space, and technology correlates with suicide by hanging, strangulation, and suffocation. It's a correlation of about 0.99. Okay, that's a dark one. Let's find a fun one. Number of people who drowned by falling into a pool correlates with films that Nicolas Cage has appeared in. Now, that's not a strong correlation. It's about 0.66. Per capita cheese consumption correlates with number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. These are really dark. Okay, let's find a, oh, here we go. The divorce rate in Maine correlates with the per capita consumption of margarine. That's not funny. Per capita consumption of mozzarella cheese correlates with civil engineering doctorates awarded. Funny correlations. I just like the Nicolas Cage one. Here are some other ones. There might be some inappropriate ones, but this is from BuzzFeed. This one's pretty famous, and we'll talk about it. Ice cream consumption leads to murder. Y'all know that's because it happens because it's hot. Both of those things tend to go up in the summer, although it is never too cold for ice cream, although I will probably not want to eat it next week. A pirate shortage caused global warming. So here we've got global average temperature in Celsius and number of pirates. Yeah, we'll skip that one. Eating organic food causes autism. Both of those have increased. M. Night Shyamalan makes bad movies because people don't buy newspapers. So there is a correlation between newspaper sales and M. Night Shyamalan's Rotten Tomatoes score. Using Internet Explorer leads to murder. So here we've got the use of Internet Explorer. Here we have the murder rate. Both are dropping. Mexican lemon imports prevent highway deaths. So importing actual lemons from Mexico, that has dropped over time, and so has the total US highway fatality rate. Obesity caused the debt bubble. Both of them very rapidly increased over time. Oh, where's the good one? Here we go. Facebook canceled out the cholesterol lowering effects of Justin Bieber. Oh, Justin Bieber. So here we kind of have our cholesterol serum. Here we have Facebook. Here we have Justin Bieber. All right. So yeah, correlations. They're kind of weird. And we will talk about why you can't make a cause-effect relationship with them next time. And we will also talk about cause-effect claims. We'll start talking about APA formatting. It will not be your favorite lecture because the rules of APA formatting are arbitrary, but you still got to do them. Yes, Emma. We do have a quiz this weekend, so the quiz will post tomorrow at 5 o'clock. It'll be due 5 minutes before class on Tuesday. Let me know if you have any questions or any problems. And don't forget that there is an extra credit question if you would like some extra credit, which I know you all would. Have a wonderful weekend. Make good choices. Don't lick doorknobs. And I will see you next time.